Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John DeLynn. We just finished a good 3.5 hours with Kelceymarie Warner. Kelcey is a well-known TikToker, 500,000 followers and counting, and one of her areas of expertise is self-harm. And because we care about mental health on Mormon Stories Podcast, and because we know there are a lot of youth and adults who deal with self-harm and who are trying to either figure out how to not self-harm themselves or to support someone else who self-harms, we thought it'd be cool to just create like a 20-minute how to deal with self-harm, either yourself or if you're supporting a loved one. And that's what we're going to do. And you go back and watch Kelcey's 3.5 hour interview if you want the in-depth, but this is just going to be kind of a primer introduction. So Kelcey, welcome back to Mormon Stories Podcast. And we're going to tell them really quickly what you do and what your TikTok channel is about.
Okay. So I have a TikTok channel about mental health with a focus on coping skills for self-harm, self-injury. And all of my videos are pretty much point of views, which is it's like watching a mini clip from a movie where you have myself playing the roles of 2 or 3 people, a parent and children. And the mother is helping the child cope with depression and self-harm. And so each video is a coping skill.
And what is it about your background that makes it so you're interested in and or qualified to or capable of becoming kind of an expert on this issue?
Okay. So as far as my background, I struggled with mental health as well as a child and did engage in self-harm behaviors through much of my teen years and into my early 20s. So, and then as far as qualifications go, all of my TikToks are from evidence-based research articles. So most notably, I use Cornell University's website. They have an excellent PDF that has a list of coping skills you can use. And it's also broken up into categories. So if it's like you're seeking sensory, try this. If you are depressed, try this. And I use that kind of to guide my videos just so I make sure that they are all evidence-based and just safe, you know.
I think it's also important to mention that you have an instructional design background because what that helps you do is design content and curriculum that's going to be compelling to people, because who cares if you have a dissertation on self-harm if nobody wants to read it because it's boring or not well designed. So that's a skill.
I do. I have a master's degree in education and instructional design. And I was actually working on my PhD in education and curriculum instruction assessment. I was about halfway through, and I decided to quit the PhD and start my second master's degree in mental health counseling. So I do have that background of lesson development, which is basically what a TikTok is. It's a very short, very compact lesson. And as you mentioned in the previous episode, you have to be very quick and very intelligent about it. So I think that helps, you know. And
what's the name of your TikTok channel?
Kelceymarie Warner. My name.
Spell Kelcey.
Kelcey. And then so Mariewarner. Kelceymarie Warner is my name.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into it. And trigger warning, we're going to be talking about self-harm. So, pause, leave, and or manage your viewing however is best for your mental health and well-being. But we're going to talk about it a bit. So let's start with, what is self-harm, what precedes it, and why do people do it?
Okay. So what is self-harm? Self-harm is anything that you do that damages your body. So like intentionally. So it can be cutting, scratching, overeating, undereating, binge drinking, just anything that hurts your body. Burning, absolutely. Yeah. Picking, like skin picking fingernails, pulling out your hair, scratching. If it hurts you, it's a form of self-harm.
Okay.
Basically.
And why do people do it?
People do it for lots of reasons. The very basic premise is that it's a coping skill. It's an unhealthy one because it damages your body. But it is a coping skill, and it's something people do because oftentimes, because of trauma, they're having a traumatic experience, and sometimes they feel numb, disconnected, and they do something to ground them. And grounding them, basically, it brings them back into this present moment, and it helps them focus. And it could be because of the pain or the endorphins that are released. Sometimes people do it because they want to punish themselves. Others do it. God, there's so many reasons.
I mean, the most common scenario I hear is that somebody's experiencing some significant distress in their lives, and that distress is intolerable. And in this weird, ironic way, by causing injury to themselves through some type of self-harm like cutting, that directed intentional pain becomes preferable to the other global distress that they're experiencing. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's also a way of gaining control in your life too, because you have control over your body now. Maybe you didn't earlier with whatever happened to you, but in this moment you have control about what happens with your body. And so self-harm and eating disorders can go hand in hand that way. It's a way of gaining control as well.
Okay. So we've talked about some of the ways that people self-harm and kind of why they might do it. Okay. So what are the healthy and unhealthy? Let's start with the unhealthy. So what are the unhealthy ways to look at and or try and treat or cope with self-harm? Does that make sense?
Okay. So unhealthy ways to treat or cope with self-harm?
Yeah. So, okay, let's say you are self-harming. What are unhealthy ways to look at your self-harming and or to try and stop or fix your self-harming, if you can think of that?
So,
or unhealthy approaches to it.
An unhealthy approach would be deciding it's for attention. A lot of people are afraid to come forward to discuss or ask for help because they don't want to be seen as attention seeking. And so don't look at yourself that way. And even if you do need attention, that's not a bad thing. Human beings need attention. So another unhealthy approach would be to not take it seriously. Even if it's not attention seeking, it is kind of a cry for help in a way, without being attention seeking. It's a sign that they need help as well. So take it seriously. Don't just brush it off. They'll get over it. Take it seriously.
What if you just feel so ashamed? It's like, this is a horrible thing. I'm doing it. I don't want anybody to know.
Know that you're not alone. I read a study recently. There was 1 in 4 girls self-harm, teenage girls. So it's not that uncommon. In fact,
1 in 4.
1 in 4. I'll send you the article later. It was kind of mind-blowing. But it's very common. I know so many people that used to self-harm. And a lot of people self-harm without even realizing they're self-harming. So even if your friend, Sarah, says she doesn't self-harm, but when she's, upset, she scratches herself, that's self-harm,
Right. What if somebody feels like they can't get better? What if somebody feels like there's just no out, that it's just become part of who they are and what they do?
You're not alone in that either. A lot of people, when they get into that state of mind, they can't see past this dark hole that they're in. So, but there is light on the other side. You just have to learn the coping skills and then build that support system and set those boundaries, because something in your life is going wrong that's putting you in this place. So try to identify what that is so you can set boundaries with that person or that issue, and small steps, you'll get there.
Okay, let's change the perspective to the person, the parent or the loved one who's trying to support someone who self-harms. Sometimes when you discover that a loved one is self-harming, it's just mind-blowing. It's revolting, or it's terrifying. It's in some ways it's violent, or it feels violent. What are the unhealthy ways that loved ones try and intervene with another loved one who's self-harming?
The most common one I hear is parents saying that they want it for attention. They're doing it for attention. And that is unhealthy because, for one, it lessens what the child is going through. It says it minimizes it.
Shame.
Mm-hmm. You just want attention, which is a bad thing, and you're making us look bad. So we're just going to brush this under the rug and it's going to go away. And I think parents do that simply because it's easier to believe your child is misbehaving than it is to realize that there's an issue in your home. And I think it's just that.
Right. So don't dismiss it as just attention seeking.
Right.
What else?
Don't think it's just a phase. Mental health is a long-term thing. People have depression for years, or anything else. And so
don't expect that there's necessarily a quick fix. Is that
exactly right. It might take time, and it's important to be patient and try to be empathetic as best as you can. Even if you can't understand, one of the most important things you can do is just be there as a parent. I feel like that's a lot of parenting. It's just being there without judgment.
What if a parent wants to be hypervigilant? In other words, like check you every day, find out where it is,
Right.
where you're harming, monitor you. Oh, you did it, put you
Right.
time out or ground you or take your phone away. I don't know. What are the ways that parents try or loved ones try and enforce or control someone's self-harm, and how does that work out when they do?
It does not work out very well at all. A lot of my viewers mention how their parents do body checks, make them undress and like look for the marks, and that just makes the kid feel worse. Because for one thing, if they screw up, they fail, they feel worse because now it's almost dehumanizing because they strip you down, they look, and that just kind of takes away control over your own body. For one thing, it sends a message to the child. The parent doesn't trust them, and then the parents are disappointed because they find what they ultimately know is there. So it just makes the child feel so much worse.
And when they feel worse, what do?
They self-harm more. They just do it. Maybe they do it somewhere else. They get better at hiding it. The issue doesn't go away. It just morphs into something else.
Yeah, right. Okay. But for a parent or a loved one who knows their loved one is self-harming, it's like, this is intolerable. We got to get this fixed.
Right.
So let's jump into, if you are self-harming, what are some healthy ways to approach it and ways that you can slowly get better?
Okay. So as an individual who struggled with self-harm, the first thing I recommend people do is look into coping skills. Coping skills, there's so many things you can do. My videos are generally more extreme things just because people enjoy those more. Squeezing ice or like rubbing it on where you would self-harm, flicking rubber bands.
Give those examples and then explain why they're good.
Okay. So flicking the rubber band is a good one. Oh, I'm sorry. Simply because it's a sensory thing. It stings a little bit, which is enough to bring you back into the moment to ground you. But it's not generally so much that it actually hurts you. Same thing with the ice. You hold ice long enough, it stings a bit, but it's still better than burning yourself. Right? So it's a minimizing behavior almost. It lessens.
I think this is called harm reduction, right?
Yes, that's what. Thank you.
No, I'm not trying to correct you. I'm just so cutting may really harm you, or burning may really harm you. So it's like, why with the rubber band you're still harming yourself. It hurts, or with the ice you're still hurting yourself. But it's about harm reduction because less harm is better than more harm.
Right.
So you gotta think about it in terms of degrees of harm. Am I right?
Yes, I agree absolutely, and it's kind of like a step on the journey. So maybe you were doing this, very graphic thing before, but now you're just squeezing ice. Maybe tomorrow you are just going to flick a rubber band, and the next day maybe you're going to go for a run, which is hard. It feels hard in your chest, but it's actually healthy for you. And so eventually people will start choosing more gentle coping skills along the way. That is my thinking process. That makes sense.
And I guess if somebody was finding some sort of satisfaction or relief from, let's just say, cutting or burning or scratching, one might ask, well, would holding ice or flipping a rubber band be enough? Can that become something that someone progresses towards where it becomes enough?
It definitely can, because people self-harm for different reasons. Some people want the pain, others want the visual of red fluids, in which case you can
Talk about that. What do you mean visual of red fluids?
So sometimes you get that release of endorphins from like a visual stimuli.
Of seeing blood, for example.
Okay. So rather than hurting yourself, you are holding like red fluid dye on your wrist or wherever and applying the ice. So as the ice melts, it does kind of sting a little bit, but it's not generally to the point that it hurts you. And then the red food dye and the melting ice trickles down as if it's blood. Right.
So it kind of satisfies whatever that need is,
yes.
and we don't even care necessarily what the need is, but if you've got it and you can satisfy it in a way, it may seem kind of interesting,
right?
But you're reducing the harm. It's a win. Is it right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thought process behind this is that it postpones the actual self-harm. So maybe it won't get rid of the overall desire, but it's delayed you like 5-10 minutes enough for it almost like clears your mind. It's like, okay, I don't actually have to do this. I have more will now not to do this because it got you past it.
You ride the wave.
Yes.
You have this peak of distress, and if you could just ride that distress wave long enough, it's going to decrease. And so if you can just kind of practice riding out that wave,
yes.
the more practice you get and experience you get riding out the wave, right. You can learn to ride out your distress and cope in a more healthy way,
yes.
so that over time you harm yourself less and less and less, and or with less harmful behaviors, such that over time you reduce the harm and then eventually stop the harm.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And when people get to that point where they're no longer like actively self-harming often, I encourage them to continue using coping skills every day anyways. So
Such as?
for myself, I go for runs and I exercise, I go hiking.
In nature.
I listen to audiobooks because sometimes my life gets stressful, but putting myself into the story mode of the audio book, it's like taking a mental break. I'm no longer in that stressful situation. I come back, headphones off. Oh, it's a breather. It was like a little break, And if you keep doing these small coping skills, they don't seem like big things. It keeps you in a good headspace. So you're less likely to go into that mode where you have to hurt yourself or even so dark that you want to kill yourself. We just do these little things every day, these coping skills.
Yeah. One thing that when I was first getting, and I have a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology, and I had clients who self-harmed. And when I first started treating clients who self-harmed, I thought my goal was to get them to stop self-harming. Mm-hmm. And when they didn't, each time I'd be like, are there marks? Are they still doing it? And when I started working with my supervisor, I realized that is the wrong way to think about this, that your goal as a therapist isn't to necessarily take away their only coping mechanism. We talked about this in the longer episode. What my supervisors taught me is sometimes, as awful as self-harm might appear, it's actually preferable to the ultimate self-harm, which is ending your life.
Right.
And I had a supervisor once tell me, never take away a coping mechanism unless you've got a superior one to replace it with.
Right.
Because if they have no coping mechanism, sometimes, believe it or not, self-harm could be keeping someone alive.
Right.
And I didn't think of it that way. So the goal isn't to eliminate the self-harm, or you may get a worse outcome or a worse form of coping. Instead, what we just talked about is your goal is to decrease the harm over time, harm reduction, and slowly replace it with healthier coping.
Right.
But don't think of it as the goal is to stop the self-harm all at once, because you may not get good results. It may be harmful to the person.
I agree. And I'm not a professional or anything, but I kind of look at self-harm as a symptom of a deeper issue. So getting the person to stop self-harming is not going to cure whatever caused them to do that in the first place. So I think we have to take a step back and look at their lives, as a system. Like, what is going on everywhere, and see if we can figure out what is the issue. For myself, it was church and then my traumatic childhood. Once I said I left the church and I set firm boundaries with my family, my life got so much better. My self-harm went away, and so we have to figure out what is causing the symptom of the, what mental illness is causing the symptom.
So do a root cause analysis.
Yes.
And if you can address the underlying issues that are causing your distress, then that might go a long way towards helping the self-harm.
That would get rid of it itself, wouldn't it?
It can, yeah. Yeah. So some people are going to go, well, John, why are you interviewing a TikToker? Like, you have a PhD in psychology. Why don't you have a professional on? Well, it's because she's making a big difference and she knows a lot. That's why. But also, what is the role of mental health professionals? Do you encourage people to see licensed mental health professionals, experts? Talk about that.
I absolutely do. So people message me and they're like, hey, I want to do this. And reach out to a hotline. If you're really struggling in this moment, contact this hotline, and I message them the hotline. I also have a link in my bio that has a list of hotlines for countries, as well as a website for Cornell University. And after encouraging them to reach out to professionals, I also give them information for other professionals that are on TikTok. I'm like, this person is on TikTok. They are a licensed therapist. This person's a psychologist I talked to. They're great. You can message them as well. They can't counsel you because you're a different state, but they can also give you more advice too. So I refer them to other professionals in their area and also online to follow, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Just to reiterate the importance of TikTok, there's a whole bunch of people that can't afford therapy.
Yeah.
Or there are a bunch of therapists that aren't competent, or that are too expensive, or that are too busy, that have a huge backlog. And so one of the main values of TikTok with competent people who know what they're doing is it's an easy way for especially younger people who may not have access to proper healthcare and or can't afford it, can get help now in a format that they're comfortable with, in a consumption in a mode of consumption that's very friendly and familiar and easy to use. So like, why shouldn't we be encouraging mental health through TikTok?
Right.
Yeah.
I agree, definitely. A lot of people that are my followers mention how they've had bad therapists and they wish that I had been their therapist. Like, well, for one thing, I'm not actually a therapist. I'm just a student. But
You will be.
I will be. Yeah, I will be. Yeah. But what you can do in the short term while you're waiting for a better therapist or you're waiting for insurance is you can educate yourself now. So you can't diagnose yourself with depression legally, but you can look into the symptoms and look into coping skills. Same thing with anything else. It's good to educate yourself so that way when it's time to go to the doctor or the therapist or whatever, you can say, I'm feeling this way. Here's my thoughts about what I read. What are your thoughts? What plan can we make together to make me healthier?
Are there like experts or books or resources that in addition to yours, people should know about? Kind of the self-harm gurus out there. Are you aware of any?
I haven't seen a whole lot of recent books into self-harm. I've been reading them, but I don't love them enough to send them to people just because they're very analytical, which is fine. But a lot of my readers aren't academically inclined. They're very young. You know, a lot of my viewers are young kids.
So there's not a self-harm for dummies kind of thing.
There's not.
Okay.
So I'm doing research to write one, but I haven't actually written
Interesting.
it. Yeah.
It's kind of a newer area. It's been around forever, but there's not been a lot of focus on it.
Right. There was one that I read, but the reviews, weren't great. Overall, in my opinion, people didn't like the terminology like self-mutilation. It sounds very graphic, and it was just very academically oriented. So I don't have any books off the top of my head that I love, but I do have TikTokers that I recommend people follow, like Rise, Thrive, Repeat, therapist named Tristan in Virginia. He's excellent. Jazz Thornton, just people off the top of my head. I do recommend people to follow these people.
And this Cornell website that's helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
And this has led to your creation of workbooks. So
Yes.
tell listeners what your workbooks are and how they can get them.
Okay. So I have a website and I also have an Etsy.
What are they called, or how do they?
The Sparrows Box. The Sparrows Box.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's your website?
Yeah, I just like the name.
Okay.
But you can also go to my TikTok and click the link in my bio. It's a link tree link, so like a million links on it.
Yeah.
Click the one for my shop. And I develop a new journal each month, and I do a lot of research into them. So I have them for anxiety, depression, self-harm, and PTSD right now, and borderline personality disorder.
And they're evidence-based?
And they're evidence-based, absolutely. So I do research for each journal, and then I also send them to people who are diagnosed with these things simply so I can have their feedback in addition to the research. So maybe I'll do a lot of reading and I'll look into what journal prompts will be relevant for borderline personality disorder. It's not going to be the same for anxiety, And so then I send the journal to some people, like, what are your thoughts? Use this for 30 days. Let me know what you think. So for example, the self-harm one, just because I feel most comfortable talking about it because it's kind of my niche, they are 30 days, and they come with mental health hotlines for your country, whether it's Israel or the UK or America. I get you a page for it, and I also send a list of coping skills, my most popular ones people recommend, as well as a link to the Cornell University's website because I love it the most. And then I also have a page for triggers and solutions. So you write down what triggers you the most, whether it's like talking to a certain person, a store, because something happens there, and then your solutions for it. So if something happens, you know what you can do. And then it's 30 days of mindful journal prompts that are meant to help you move forward. So it'll have boxes like what coping skill I tried, did it work? Why didn't it work, or why did it work? So you can kind of get an idea and know yourself better, what your needs are, as well as keep track of what you have tried. So when you go to your therapist, they say, what'd you try this week? You're like, oh, I can't remember. It's like, oh, it's right here. It's right here in front of me, And I also have sections for people to keep track of who they contacted, how that person responded as well, just so you can work on your support system, because support systems are essential with mental health. And you don't ever have to worry about bothering someone because you know that you didn't contact them for like 5 days, and that's like once a week. That's fine. You're not a bother. And more than that, I have also created different designs. So those one like smaller for like backpack sizes for kids to take them to school or take them to work with you. I've also got them for themes. Like I get requests for like Harry Potter Hogwarts houses or Taylor Swift or something, So I just tried to make sure that they were very user friendly and helpful. So after like a month, I'll get like an email like, "Hi, what are your thoughts on this? How can I make it better?" So each month I also improve on the previous ones I made. So.
And overall, what have been people's experiences with these workbooks? How has it helped them? And if so, how?
Overall, very positive. One of the best reviews I got was from a girl. She messaged me asking for an Ariel themed one. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And then she emailed me like 3 months later saying, "Hi, my friend just got out of the psych ward."
Ariel as in Little Mermaid?
Little Mermaid.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I made a Little Mermaid one. And I sent it to her friend who was in a psych ward. Her friend, of course, couldn't have it till after she finished her time in the psych ward. But her friend told her it had been a huge help because it helped her realize what worked and what didn't work. And she used it every day just to keep track of her moods. And it was an amazing tool. And that's the whole point of journaling, was just to be a tool to fight and combat self-harm, Yeah. So, yeah.
Beautiful. And just to be clear, we're not getting any money for this. This isn't a paid sponsorship. We simply, when we discover cool things that help people, we want to promote it. And that's the only reason we're doing this. And it's a credit to you for all your good work.
Thank you. I do a lot of research into it and spend hours a day making these. And I send some out free when I can. Like if maybe people ask, they can donate money to help send out free journals to kids. Because
yeah, how can people support you?
Well, I'm making a donations page that is just for the journals. So that means like if there's a 12-year-old kid whose parents won't buy them one, well, I can make it to you and send it to you tomorrow. If your parents are okay with your address being given out. And so that should be up by the end of the month. I'm trying to figure out a page that is just for that,
Okay.
If you have any ideas, let me know,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So just to close, for someone who's struggling, who's in the thick of kind of self-harm and they're feeling hopeless and they're feeling lost and discouraged, final word of encouragement or support for them?
It gets better. It really does. I know it may not seem like it right now, but with the boundaries and coping skills, you will experience so much more joy than you ever thought yourself capable. And I look back on times in my life when I was self-harming or considering suicide. I had no idea the incredible places I would go, the people I would meet, the little children that I would create and love more than myself. It does get better.
And you can get better.
Can get better.
And for a parent or a loved one that's seeing their loved one in pain and suffering and they don't know how to reach them or help them, final tips or advice or encouragement for them?
I know it's really hard and it's scary. I used to wonder every day if I walk in and see my sister dead, because she struggled as well. And there are a lot of incredible support groups out there for parents, people who you can lean on and, improve your support system. My biggest advice is for parents is to listen without judgment. Because there's something going on in your kid's life. Maybe you don't see it yet, So just listen and watch and love unconditionally.
That sounds so simple, but it's...
Yeah, it's a simple message, but it works.
It's hard, but it sounds so simple.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for all the work you do. Please tell our listeners one final time how they find you and your resources.
Okay. So my website is www.thesparrowsbox, so the THE, Sparrow, SPARROWS, box, BOX.com. Sorry if that was long. And there's also my TikTok, which is just my name. So it's Kelcey, KELCEY, Kelceymarie Warner. It should be pretty easy to find.
And then you've also got a Discord and a Facebook, right?
Yes. The Facebook is called Welcome to the Panic Room. And the Discord, I can't remember the name actually, but it's linked in my bio from TikTok. So
your Linktree bio
in my Linktree, yeah.
On TikTok. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks so much for all you're doing. Thanks for coming on. And listeners, get help, whether it's through Kelcey or a licensed mental health professional. Find an expert in self-harm, because most significant mental illnesses really do require an expert to get better. A generalist just isn't going to be what you need. But work with Kelcey, find an expert, have hope, and you can do this. And thanks so much again, Kelcey.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really great.